Before anything else, understand this. The archive room in the basement of Corrine Hollow State Hospital holds files on patients who are dead. Every single one of them. That was the rule they gave Darren Teague on his first night. Don't worry about the basement files. Nobody down there is checking out. On his fourth night, Darren pulled a folder off the shelf with a red tab that read active. His own name was typed on the cover. The intake date was 4 days earlier, the exact night he started working there. Keep that detail close. It's going to matter more than you think. Corrine Hollow State Hospital ran as a psychiatric facility from 1951 until 1987, when it closed the way these places usually do. No scandal in the papers, just a line item that stopped appearing in the next year's budget. It sat empty for almost 40 years after that, rigged with chain link until the state finally approved demolition. Before the wrecking crews could touch it, an abatement company had to strip the asbestos and lead paint. Federal law required an overnight security presence during that process. A private firm called Redgrave Field Services needed a guy, and the contract paid time and a half plus a hazard bonus the recruiter described without a trace of irony as structural, not supernatural. Darren Teague was 34, and his wife, Colleen, had been diagnosed with early-stage multiple sclerosis the winter before. The medication wasn't the expensive part. The specialists were. The gaps insurance called patient responsibility added up to a number that made his stomach hurt worse than any night shift ever had. Structural, Darren repeated to Colleen that night, sitting on the edge of their bed. He said it like it was supposed to make me feel better. Does it? She asked. A little. I was mostly worried about ghosts. She threw a pillow at him. It was, by their standards, a very good joke. It was the last time either of them laughed about the building without meaning it. The foreman running the abatement crew was a man named Gus Pellerin, who had exactly one topic of conversation on the first walkthrough. 14 buildings I've stripped in this state, Gus told him. This is the only one where my guys asked to leave before dark. One fella quit over the phone from the parking lot. Didn't even say why. Darren laughed it off. He needed the 12 weeks. The wrongness started small enough that he almost didn't count it. Second night, a sound down C-wing that could have been settling pipes, except the water had been shut off to that wing since the Clinton administration. Third night, the temperature in the east stairwell dropped enough to see his breath, while the hallway 10 feet away stayed a normal, boring 68 degrees. Fourth night was the folder with his name on it. After that, he stopped writing things down as unconfirmed and started writing them down as evidence, because whatever was happening, it clearly wanted to be cataloged, and Darren had spent enough of his life doing inventory to recognize a system when he saw one. The basement archive was 3 long rooms of steel shelving, sagging under decades of patient files the state had never bothered to properly transfer or apparently properly lock. Darren wasn't supposed to touch them. He touched them anyway, because a man alone in a building for 11 hours a night either finds something to do or starts listening too closely to the noise the building makes. Every file included, alongside the medical history, a section labeled Fear Response Index. Not symptoms, not diagnosis. An itemized list of what each patient was afraid of, written in flat, clinical language. Patient exhibits marked distress response to enclosed dark spaces. Patient unable to tolerate the sound of a door closing without visual confirmation of the door. Some files had a second stamp, index confirmed via direct observation. Darren didn't like that stamp. He couldn't have told you why. Not yet. That same week, the noises stopped being ambiguous. He heard quite clearly from the far end of a hallway he had already checked, a low voice counting backward, unhurried, almost clinical. 10, 9, 8. Darren walked toward it, not out of courage, because stopping meant something to the quiet that followed. The hallway was empty when he reached it. The air was 12 degrees colder than the rest of the floor. He did not hear it reach 0, not that night. He told himself that was good news. He was wrong. But it would take him a while to find that out, and in the meantime, there was a paycheck to earn and a wife to keep insured, so he kept coming back. The name on nearly every index confirmed stamp belonged to a Dr. Harlan Cobb, listed on staff records as Director of Behavioral Therapeutics, 1974 to 1987. Darren found Cobb's personnel file wedged behind a filing cabinet, water damaged along one edge, most of it still legible. Cobb had run something called directed confirmation therapy. The theory was simple. A patient's fear, properly identified and precisely reproduced under controlled conditions, could be confronted directly and, through repeated exposure, extinguished. The paperwork called it extinguishing. It never once used the word torture, though Darren did, reading a decade of session notes at 2 a.m. in a dying building, found himself supplying that word without much effort. Patients were placed in isolation, their specific fear, cataloged in that itemized index, was reproduced as precisely as staff could manage. Sound, temperature, darkness, whatever the file called for, then escalated across sessions until the patient stopped reacting. Cobb's own notes called this endpoint successful desensitization. A later note, in a different, more unhurried hand, tucked into the same folder, called it something else. They stop reacting because there's nothing left in them to react with. I don't think we're curing anything. I think we're hollowing them out and calling the hollow space progress. The note was unsigned. Darren found out later from a state audit summary buried further along that it belonged to a junior clinician who filed a formal complaint in 1986. The complaint triggered the audit. The audit shut the program down within 4 months. No press release, just a budget line that stopped existing the following fiscal year. The audit found no evidence officially of lasting harm. Darren sat with that phrase for a long time, officially. Because something about that process hadn't ended when the funding did. Something had kept the index. Something was still confirming entries. On a Tuesday, in his 6th week, alone in the basement with a folder he had no business opening, Darren found his own name filed under a category that hadn't existed anywhere else in the archive. Current subject. The file was thin. Most of his life wasn't in it, which was somehow worse than if it had been. Whoever or whatever kept this archive wasn't interested in his life, only in one specific week of it. Age 7, a 3-night evaluation stay after months of night terrors no pediatrician could explain, back when Corrine Hollow still ran a children's evaluation wing under a different program name. His parents pulled him out after the 3rd night, spooked by something Darren had never been told and had never thought to ask about. The evaluation notes were clinical and brief. Patient reports a recurring presence at the foot of the bed. Presence engages in a counting behavior, descending from 10. Patient reports the presence, vocalizes his name upon reaching the final count. Stamped at the bottom, in the very hand as every other confirmed file in the basement, index confirmed via direct observation. The final page was dated 4 days into his current contract. Nobody's signature was on it. It read only, "Resuming session. Subject returned." Darren stood in the basement for a long time. He did not move. He didn't speak. He simply stood there in that flat, fluorescent hum, holding a folder that had apparently been waiting 27 years for him to open it and let the weight of that settle all the way down before he let himself think about what came next. That was when the flashlight in his hand flickered once on its own. The temperature dropped, and somewhere closer than it had ever been, the voice started again. 3, 2, 1. It reached 0, and it said his name. What happened in the final 2 weeks of the contract, Darren has only ever described to one person, and even then, only in pieces. Some of it he genuinely cannot put into words that make sense outside of that building at 3 in the morning. What he will say is this: it did not chase him through the hallways. It didn't need to. It had a file and a method refined over 13 years of clinical patience before anyone tried to stop it. And it used both. Doors he had personally checked locked would be standing open when he circled back. The cold that had once been isolated to a single stairwell began following him room to room. The voice counted every night now, twice. It counted from directly behind him, close enough that he felt breath he could not explain move against the back of his neck. On what would have been his final Tuesday, 3 days before the contract ended, Darren did not hear a 10 count at all. He heard his name first, spoken only gently, almost kindly, the way you'd wake a child for school. He turned around in the east stairwell for 1 full second before his flashlight beam swung past it. He saw something crouched on the landing above him. It had the general shape of a person and none of the specific details of one, the way a shadow has the shape of the thing it casts without needing any of the thing's actual texture. It did not move toward him. It did not need to. It simply said, in a voice built from a register too low and too calm to be anyone alive, "Session confirmed." Darren does not remember leaving the building that night. He remembers the parking lot. He remembers Gus Pellerin finding him there at 6 the next morning, sitting in his truck with the doors locked and the engine off, still in his uniform. "You look like hell," Gus said. "Feels about right," Darren said. He finished the contract. Redgrave would have voided his hazard pay otherwise, and he had already earned 11 weeks of it. That much is true, but it isn't the whole truth. The whole truth is simpler and worse. By that point, he understood that leaving early would not have ended anything. Whatever confirmed its index on him at age 7 and resumed the session decades later did not strictly need the building to reach him. The building was only where it had learned to find him first. The demolition crew brought Corrine Hollow down on schedule. Darren watched from the road with Gus and the rest of the crew. When the east wing came down in a long, collapsing groan of dust, he felt something in his chest ease slightly, the way a held breath eases, not fully, but enough to notice. He told himself it was over. For 6 weeks, it seemed to be. Then, one night, Colleen sat up in bed beside him, wide awake, eyes open, speaking in the flat, distant way of someone talking just underneath sleep, rather than fully within it. "Something was counting," she said. Darren went very still. "It got to 0, Colleen said in a voice that was hers and also, in some small way, Darren could not name, not entirely hers. And then it said your name. He had never told her about the counting. Not the number, not the voice, not any detail specific enough to be repeated back to him with that flat, precise certainty. It was not in any file she could have read. He had never once, to her or to anyone, told that story out loud in 27 years. Colleen blinked, seemed to come fully awake, and asked him with genuine confusion why he was staring at her like that. Darren did not answer right away. He is still calm about it, as far as anyone can tell. Thorough about it. He has started keeping a log again, quietly, the way he once logged conditions in the building for a company that no longer had any reason to call him. He had not told Colleen what the log is for. He has one working theory, and he doesn't like it. An index does not need a building. It only ever needed a subject. And now, as far as he can tell, it has two. If someone once wrote down exactly what frightens you in a file you never saw and never signed and never agreed to, and if that fear could be reproduced precisely enough to prove it was real, how would you ever know whether you'd stopped being afraid of it or whether it had simply been waiting for the right night to confirm the file was still open? I'm Dark Veil. Lock your doors, count your blessings instead of anything else. Good night.